Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Stefan Schinkel, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. We're excited to share the latest and greatest on dotCMS. But before I hand over to Will, I wanted to share some housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded and shared afterwards. At the end of the webinar, we will have a live Q&A session. And without further ado, over to you, Will.
Thank you, Stefan, and welcome everyone to dotCMS's Fall Update 2021. I've entitled this presentation Scaling Up, and there's been a lot of exciting news happening at dotCMS, including the fact that dotCMS has been acquired by an investment firm, and this is really going to help us continue to focus on the product and help us accelerate the roadmap and new capabilities within the product itself. So we're really excited about that news. If you hadn't heard, that's a really exciting news for the company and the product. So my name is Will Ezell. I'm the Chief Technology Officer and co-founder of dotCMS. I've been around dotCMS and working with dotCMS now for over 15 years, and I am in charge of the product roadmap. And when defining what is going into the product roadmap, what we're going to be working on within the product itself, we look at features through pillars, 4 pillars, and really these are lenses through which we use to define our features and define really what our work streams are going to look like when we're continuing to build a product. And the first one is cloud and sustainability. That includes the management of the platform itself and the focusing on adding cloud features and becoming much more cloud native. The second pillar that we look at new features with is what we call hybrid content management. Hybrid content management is very important to us, and it distinguishes us from the pure headless content management systems out there. Hybrid content management means that you have all the tooling of a headless content management system, all of the APIs, everything's API first. Content can be sliced and diced and updated and worked with through APIs. But it also means that we can also support more traditional content management, things like page building, things like delivering documents, pushing things through workflow. All of those capabilities really mean that our content management system is really a pure hybrid content management system. Another pillar or theme that we look to drive our new developments is no code. Really, there should be no code, low code. We don't think it should take a computer science degree to be able to manage your content management system or to build templates or to use functionality within the tool itself. And wherever possible, we enable the business user to be able to make really profound changes within the digital experiences without having to resort to going to a developer. And that no-code philosophy really permeates the entire software product. And then finally, the last pillar that we focus on is ever improving the user experience. And the user experience, the end user experience is primary to us. We have done a lot of work in every release on improving the user experience, and we just continue to focus on that moving forward. So with that said, the way that this presentation plays out is I'd like to recap what we've done and then talk about what we are going to take on. So, 2021 has been a great year for us. We've really accelerated the developments and really are pushing forward within the product itself, and delivered a lot of really compelling features that I think are useful and add value to the product across the board. Things like embedding and integrating with a CDN solution, this CDN solution, dotCMS using workflows can automatically invalidate CDN entries so that your content is always, the freshness of your content is always maintained. You can get reporting from the CDN in terms of traffic and things of that nature. And even in push publishing, when you push publish, if your production server has its own CDN, you can invalidate the new content that's been published into production, and that can happen automatically. We've also re-enabled inline editing. Now, this is something that we had pre, our Angular backend, but we've re-enabled that, so now you can just inline edit. If your page is set up to do it, you can just, from edit mode, click on a piece of content and begin editing that content. Auto-scaling and clustering, a PubSub framework for auto-scaling and clustering allows for much cleaner scaling up and down of your clusters. A no-code or low-code page builder, what that means is in order to build pages for a headless or a hybrid implementation, really all you're doing is just laying content onto a page. You don't need to create a container. You don't need to create templates, sort of the traditional content management objects. With a no-code page builder, you can just get started immediately with a headless implementation. Metadata cache for binary assets, which is really important for performance, especially API performance. GraphQL cache and an embedded GraphQL playground. GraphQL cache completely accelerates all API calls and really has made a difference in terms of server and delivery load, the amount of load that a server can take, really for fully dynamic GraphQL queries. And the GraphQL playground is just an embedded tool to be able to inspect and test, the GraphQL capabilities within dotCMS. And finally, moving to more modern versions of Java. Java 11 is just the start. We plan to continue this as Java 17, which is the next LTS version of Java. As that becomes more popular, we'll be able to support that as well. So this is what we've worked on, and this has all been already delivered in 2021. And if you do move to the LTS version in 2106, the 2106 LTS, it actually has all those features built into it. And we did, if you want to see demonstrations of that, we did an LTS video. In the second half of that video, I walk through some of those features and walk through some of those and do demonstrations of the different features there as well. So hopefully you can click on this link here. Hopefully the encoding won't strip out the URL, but you should be able to click on the link and be taken to that video if you're interested in seeing what's in 2106 LTS. So in other big news with dotCMS, this is something we're tooting our horn again and again, is SOC 2 certification for our cloud. So dotCMS Cloud is received a SOC 2 Type 2 certification for the cloud product. The Type 2 is important because that indicates it's not a point in time, it's observation over time. So we proved over an extended time period our security credentials and controls were in place and were adequate. And it's really this initial report and initial certification is just the start. We're going to continue to recertify our cloud product year over year. And we're also exploring other certifications, security certifications, such as ISO 27001. Our SOC 2 certification was done by Bar Advisory, and a hat tip to them. They did a great job, and it was a pleasure working with them. So that brings me up to about the middle of the year to 2106, which is the June release, which we've turned into an LTS release. But I want to talk about what we've been working on since then and what we're planning on working on in the future. I really feel like we finished 2021 very, very strongly and with a lot of new improvements that I think are going to benefit everyone who uses the system. The first thing I want to share is the idea of the content palette. And really this changes the way that you'll interact with edit mode in the back end. It changes the way you can manage pages and content in the back end. And let me just share a demo of what this looks like. Now, this is a two-part development. The first part actually was released in 2110, which allows you to use the content palette to create new content. And the second part will be released in, I don't know, 2111 or 2112, which will allow you to reuse content from the content palette. So I'm running the latest master. I just want to share what this looks like and how this interacts with edit mode. So now when I come to a dotCMS site or a dotCMS page, what you can see here is I'm presented with a list of the content types that can be used on this particular page. And actually, let me create a new page and I'll share with you the process of page building, because it really speeds up the idea of building pages and creating new content, reusing content in the system. So here's a blank page. I click on edit here and I can begin to just drag if I want to create a new piece of content here, headline. So this is, my Rican Dream Vacation, right? And so I'm going to make this a header, center it, go ahead and publish that, and you can see it just right in line created that particular piece of content. I can then come and say, okay, I want to drop a banner underneath that or maybe above it, and it can let me create a banner. But I can also say, I want to reuse a banner. And so let me reuse the Costa Rican banner and drop that banner right above it. So I can just continue on this way and continue to build out my page. Here is my body content, and I can hit publish there. And I come back and you can see here, my body content's all online. And I can drop anything that this particular container is going to take, I can drop into the container. So for example, I can drop let's say a product. I'll reuse a product. Let's drop a marmot tent there. When you couple the drag and drop editing of content on a page with the visual layout of a page that's available in dotCMS, really the whole process of building pages in dotCMS just became a whole lot simpler. We've always been somewhat clicky when you're using content on a page or reusing content on the page, and this really lowers the barrier and makes content, managing page content really, really seamless. The second piece that we've worked on since 2106 is the dotCMS command line. This is an example command line. It's actually part of, if you take a look at our GitHub repo, it's right in the root. If you click on Tools, Command Line Interface CLI, this is a command line that's written in Bash that will actually import sites, will also import content types, languages, assets, templates, and containers, given a particular structure like a bundle structure here, which organizes this stuff in a very understandable way. So for example, underneath sites, you can see here we have the host and the demo or content types, the files, including the language. It'll automatically create the languages. And the way you use it is you create this bundle of these objects within your Git repository, and then you can drop down to the command line, and actually here you can see here I'm in this command line directory where I have this dotCMS CLI. Now if I take a look, one important thing is that you have to set the config for the command line to work, so there has to be a dotCMS base URL that it's going to be hitting. There has to be a JSON web token that it's going to be using in order to push these content objects. But once you have that set up, it's very easy to push that bundle into your dotCMS. So I can run here, if you see, I can run dotCMS CLI, it's going to give me a nice help information, and I can say, let's say I want to push this bundle, the bike shop bundle. And this bike shop bundle, you can see here, if you look at my screen, it has a content type, bike, it has files, it has a site definition, which is going to create a site called mycoolbike.com. And I run that, see, and it pushes the files, it pushes the site, and now if I take a look at my dotCMS and come to my browser, and you can see here now we have two sites, right? We have demo.dotCMS and we also have mycoolbike.com. I go into mycoolbike.com, there's the VTL file, there are the images. You can also see in Spanish, the VTL file also got pushed in Spanish, so you can use multilingual files if you want to, if that's important to you. But basically, by doing this, it allows you to push, your content types, languages. Let's take a look at the content type that we pushed. Here's the content type. It allows you to push all of that from a command line interface. And so why is that important? Well, it's obviously important in a continuous integration, continuous delivery standpoint that you can store all of these objects in a version control repo, Git repo, and push them to your dotCMS instances as they change. Again, this was just an example. It's written in Bash to make it super easy to understand and can be replicated using whatever tools. But this is, it's a tool that does now ship with dotCMS. A couple other important things about it. dotCMS, as of dotCMS, I think 1.7 or 2107 or 2108, uses the idea of deterministic identifiers. And deterministic identifiers means that the same asset put into on the same host in the same place is going to have the same identifier wherever that asset lives. So if we take a look at what we pushed, and let's say this asset here, the 121596 JPEG, you can see here the identifier is 4D28. Now, if I delete it, and then reran our bundle, it's going to put that file back. So if I come back now, I just put that file back, and if I take a look at it again, it's going to have the same identifier that it did before. So the identifier is calculated by where it lives on the site within dotCMS, and that's important because what that means is you can use the dotCMS command line interface to build your base, or to push all of the code that's important for your implementations into multiple environments. So you can use it to push into your dev environment, your UAT environment, your pre-prod environment, what have you. And when you set up content publishing and push publishing between those environments, all of those assets are not going to conflict. They're going to have the exact same identifiers that they had in every other environment. And so it really allows you to begin to build the pipeline of saving your code within a Git repository, and then managing your content and pushing your content within dotCMS. So again, this example's on GitHub. It's easy to get going with. If you are running an Agile release, it's definitely worth checking out. So a third thing that we're working on, and this is coming out probably in 2112, if not maybe 2201, but the idea of unlimited fields on content, right? So this is the idea of storing content as JSON. We're initially going to be storing that in the database, and we're getting rid of the legacy fields where there's text 1, text 2, text 3, text 4. The legacy fields that basically limited you to having 25 fields of any given data type. And now the idea is that with the storing content as JSON allows you to create any content type that you wish, and really sets us up for the cloud future, NoSQL future, where we can, rely on, a global database, a cloud-based key value store like DynamoDB or, Redis, or even, storing the JSON objects in S3 and pulling those down as they're requested and caching them locally. So this has been a long time coming. I've talked about it probably for 5 years, but it is now, actually, I believe it's in master, or will be in master even this week. So it's definitely on its way. So while we're doing these larger scale improvements, we're also doing Agile improvements, and this comes out every Agile release is, we're picking off anywhere from 30 to 60 different issues and bugs and fixes and improvements, and it's really been the timed release and the Agile release schedule has really been I think a blessing for the R&D team and the engineering teams as well as the LTS as well. But it allows us to push out new improvements and get those improvements vetted in a really meaningful way. And while most production customers are relying on the LTS, but I just want to show some of these Agile improvements that we're working on or that are actually out or in the product already. And these are all important in little ways. So for example, one thing that's often been requested is to improve our content listing screen, right? And so what we've done is basically cleaned up the content listing screen and added a thumbnail to the content listing screen. Now we've also had the card view, which is an important, piece, but you can see here that the thumbnail really makes this screen look really nice. And this is in master. This isn't released yet, but you can see that it really does look very nice. Another improvement is the ability to change the default language from the UI. dotCMS is always changing the default language has always been a challenge in dotCMS because it's a startup property. It has to get set specifically before starter's imported. If you do it after the starter's imported, it can cause all kinds of issues. But now we have the ability just from the back end to change the default language, from English, let's say, to Spanish. And it's going to automatically ask you, do you want to, one of the issues with changing the default language is file assets, where, the default language lots of times that's where the file assets lives, and this is automatically going to allow you to copy those assets or move those assets over to the new default language so your site will work appropriately. It's a small thing, but I think for our international clients will really appreciate that. Secure password generator. This is just a small tool where you can, for any given account, you can generate a secure password. It's automatically going to generate a secure unguessable password and set that for that particular user's password. Things like email delivery tester. So lots of times configuring dotCMS emails can be a challenge. So things like workflow emails or forgot password email flows need testing. Well, this just is a button that allows you to send a test email to the logged in user. So you can see whether or not the email is going to be delivered. You can see whether or not, all of your SPF records and things like that are all set correctly as well. Headless widget support. Now, this is an interesting one. And this is definitely interesting, I think, for our headless clients. The idea is that if you take a look at a dotCMS page, you can drop, we have the idea of widgets, and really what widgets are is kind of a code field that renders, that does things like content polls or whatever, renders lists of content or different things. And what the headless widget support does is it allows you to write your widget in such a way that you can also include in your widget a JSON rendition of that widget. So by populating this .json object for example, what that means when you call the page API is it means that you're going to also get in the page API, if I take this is the page API response here, and I'll just refresh it. If you take a look at the content, you can see here is the travel blog header, and then down here, this is the widget, but there's a new field here, which is the widget code JSON. And what this is the JSON rendition of what that widget is returning. And so it allows you to create a hybrid component. It allows you to create a component that can be rendered via HTML on the front end in sort of a traditional manner, and also be rendered by custom components, headless components, that can now consume this widget JSON here and render that in your headless implementations as well. Another piece we're working on, smarter .asset image filters. Previously, the image filters, or especially the short version image filter, hasn't respected the order of your arguments. And so if you say, I want to resize the image and then crop the image, it would actually, I believe, crop it first and then resize it after that. And that's going to give you kind of indeterminate results. So what we've done is really made that respect the image filter order. And then we're also continuing to build out, the apps that are available in dotCMS, and we'll be delivering a new app, a prerender.io plugin. And this will be an add-on, but what this will allow you to do is to, get a prerender.io subscription, and if your site, your dotCMS site is using a bunch of JavaScript on the front end, or is, using, headless or client-side technologies to build the page, what prerender.io does is it senses whenever search engines coming to your site to spider the site, it'll automatically go and actually pre-render the page, including all the content in it, and deliver that to the search engine instead of the original response. And so what that does is it basically makes your headless sites and your headless, your client-side rendered sites, it makes them SEO friendly. And this is something that many customers have been asking us about, and is a new plugin and component that we're working on as well. So all of this, you can see I demoed a lot of it. All of this is in master. All of this is coming or has been delivered or is already in master and going to be released in the next couple of releases. Another piece we're working on. This is something I'm almost embarrassed to put this in here because I think I've been talking about this for a year, but we did a lot of discovery and a lot of homework on picking the right block content editor. The idea is that there's a new field type called story block, and what the story block does is it allows a editor experience where you can drag and drop the order of what you're editing within the editor. It also allows that content to be stored as JSON and HTML. So it can be rendered, again, it's a hybrid, it's capable of being rendered from a hybrid perspective as JSON or as HTML, and can be used headlessly and on traditional pages. But it also allows you to inject content within a WYSIWYG. And so I have our work in progress here. You can see this is an example of our control. I'm looking at our storyboard here where I'm actually running our story block control, but I can do things like add a new heading, hello webinar, or if I want to select a content and drop a piece of content into the middle of our block, we can do that. And I can say, okay, I'm going to drag this up here, or maybe this content goes down to the bottom, and all of this is, controllable and stored within the dotCMS as a JSON object. And so it can be got at and rendered headlessly, including all of these different blocks. And this content block will actually return the content object that has been dropped in within the story itself. So the idea is, you can write a content story. You can edit this content story, drag and drop the different components around, and you can drop videos or widgets or photo galleries right into the middle of your content story, and it's all going to be structured within the content management system as a JSON object. So we get a lot of requests from customers that are looking to use kind of a block type editor, and this is going to be really nicely integrated with dotCMS. You'll be able to drag and drop images right on top of it as well. So let me jump to real quick, and I'm going to try to run through these. These are developery. The next couple slides are developery. These should be of interest to people who either run or manage dotCMS clusters, but we're introducing a new implementation of the Redis Cache as well as a PubSub implementation. And so what this does is it allows dotCMS to scale up or down to from 1 to 10 nodes really seamlessly. And it also provides a cluster-aware cache for all of the dotCMS objects. And that has the benefit of allowing dotCMS on a cold start. You can bring new dotCMS Docker images up, and instead of slamming the database, they're going to go and pull all of the content and deliver all of the the objects from the Redis cache. Redis can also be used for session replication, which would allow for stateless websites. We haven't tested that, but I know that we do have some customers that are using Redis for session replication. That just again allows nodes to come in and out of the cluster without any impact to an end user's experience. So that's something that's coming within the next, I would say, 1 or 2 versions. We're also moving, for developers out there, we're moving away from Gradle. We've used Gradle for a very long time. We're starting to move towards Maven. Maven's really the Java standard, and tools that are available for Maven or that are very important to us, a lot of times they're not available in Gradle, or they're poorly maintained, or they're old, or what have you. But Maven's going to allow us to update our build, test, and deliver pipeline, and make sure that flow, that what we're building and testing is what we're delivering, and also allows us to do things like dedupe. We have so many libraries in dotCMS. It'll allow us to dedupe those libraries, which is hugely important when we're moving to more modern Java versions, if we want to move to Java 16, 17, for example. And we're also moving to the idea, and we started this already, but we're moving to the idea of the monorepo, where everything's going to be living under the core. And we've already done this with the Docker images, but we're also going to be moving the front-end UI under there as well. Another piece that we are in the process of improving is how OSGi inits and how you can interact with OSGi within dotCMS. So, the OSGi screen is pretty clunky. You have to click and upload an OSGi plugin right into it, but this will allow you to do things like drag and drop plugin installations. Back in, I think it was, 5 years ago, maybe longer, we moved to the idea of fragments, and now we're actually moving away from the idea of fragments. Fragments are kind of arcane, but fragments are basically, telling Java what libraries the OSGi plugin can use, but they have the unintended effect of actually, when a new fragment is seen by OSGi, it re-inits the OSGi framework, and so that actually causes a lot of hiccups with OSGi. We've seen this, customers have seen this loading and unloading plugins. Things can get caught, and OSGi can get hung up. And so what we're doing is moving away from fragments and actually automatically updating the OSGi export file with any export that the plugin needs. And so this will allow OSGi, when a new dotCMS comes online, to really init smoothly. So looking ahead, our goal at dotCMS to continually deliver value to our customers. I've picked a couple things to share with you that we're working on that are probably 4 to 6 months away, but we're pretty excited about. And the first one that I want to talk about is improving the content search and the browser screens. Right? If you've used dotCMS, we have the idea of the browser screen, we have the idea of the content search screen, and those two, operate slightly differently. And, the thing is that while content can live on the browser and under folders, the browser screen doesn't show that, and it's not really clear in the browser search screen. So the idea is to take those two screens and put them together and create a single screen that you can use to browse content of different types, to browse folders and sites as well. And in order not to overwhelm business users, we're going to allow, kind of like we do now, where we have these customized content screens where, okay, I click here and all I'm going to see are banners. We're going to allow customized views of this screen that can do things like don't show the browser tree, or lock it to a particular content type, or lock it to a particular folder, and give you really a fine-grained, as a dotCMS site administrator, give you a fine-grained control on how to build a view that your business users are going to be able to engage with effectively. But this right now is in the wireframing stages. I just want to share some of the ideas with you. This, I'm looking at our Figma. You can see here, this is just a mock-up of the screen, and you can do things like change from, list view to card view, but you can also here, open the, the folder list as well, or you can pull down content type, and so I'm going to pull down user info, for example, or if I'm going to do an advanced search, and this hasn't been finalized, what this advanced search look like, I'm going to go ahead and have this drop down where it's going to show, the advanced search properties based upon what content types that I've selected. Also, if you want to do like bulk processes, you can click on one or more different pieces of content, and this is going to give you the options, bulk action options as well. And this is the initial blush of the new browser and content search. The idea also as well is that it's going to build really what are called chips, or to allow a faceted search. So when you begin to say title : .blog or whatever, then it's going to add a chip with that particular argument underneath it that you can then remove if you want as well. And showing the query, then what you're doing here really, and try to hide it from end users, but what you're doing here is really building that content query that you can use wherever from a headless perspective, or build from a more traditional perspective. But the beauty of this is that it's also going to allow us to do drag and drop, right? So the idea is that you're going to be able to drag files in, and in this case, we're dragging them into this images screen, and it's automatically going to create the images within the system itself. Once those have been uploaded, you can say, okay, I want to delete them, or I want to publish them, or save and publish, or push publish them, whatever. And here we're stealing, books from, well-liked tools like Box.com and, Google Drive. But the idea is that if you want to drag files like into a folder, you can drag them into a folder there, or you can just drag them onto the, to the screen, and it's going to automatically create those as well. We're doing a lot of work. This is all going to be, obviously, Angular driven and really performant. The drag and drop on the browser tree has been something that we've needed for a very long time, and this is going to really take us there and take us to the next level. And then finally, I want to end with this: analytics and testing. This is talked about this for a while now, and we started and stopped on it, and had a proof of concept of analytics and what that could look like, and moved away from the ideas. But we're in the process right now of hiring up product managers, and hiring up front-end developers, also hiring up Java architects who come in and help us design and actually really firmly implement the analytics and testing components of dotCMS. And we just see the analytics driving lots of decisions, I think, from a content perspective, from integrating AI into dotCMS, and from understanding how people are using the system, We just see that as a really critical component to springboard into, offering a lot of new tools and a lot of information and that can help really optimize your visitors' journeys and your customers' experiences, using the dotCMS or using dotCMS powered sites. And so with that said, I'd like to thank everyone for joining me. We'll have a question and answer session, and please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. And I thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right, thanks, Will, for sharing. That was a lot and super exciting to see what the team has delivered this year so far and what they're working on. We're going to open up for questions right now, so please use the either the chat box or the Q&A widgets for your questions. I know that Nathan, thanks for asking that question on the OSGi plugin. But please do ask any question that you might have on the product, because we got Will here. So
the block. Okay, so we got asked a question here.
Yes.
That when is the block content editor going to be available to use? We're looking at putting out sort of an MVP version of the block content editor, probably within the next 2 months. It might be 3 months, but it's certainly going to be within, before the next, 6 months. If you are requiring something like the block content editor now and have a little bit of experience in dotCMS, you could easily create a custom field that would replicate some of the controls there in the block content editor.
Yeah, good question, Sarah. Anyone else? Any other questions for Will? Now that we have him. Maybe a generic question, Will. I've seen a lot of UI UX stuff in the product, which is always, to me, really exciting. What are the topics in that regard you would like to address that you haven't discussed in your presentation?
Well, I feel like the UI UX in dotCMS is a constant sort of polishing process as we go from screen to screen and rebuild some of what are legacy screens into more modern screens and more modern implementations. Wherever we can, we're implementing drag and drop. For example, like even the plugins, which we're touching right now, that screen's it's only used really by developers, but being able to drag and drop plugins right into there and have them load and activate is going to help really the workflow. But yeah, I think that we've done a lot of work on edit mode. There's probably more work that's coming down the pipe with regard to edit mode. And just to continue to make that process much cleaner. But after we tackled, I think, the content search and the content browser, the next biggie is going to be the actual content editing screen. And that is going to be a biggie, because I know a lot of our customers have custom fields that we're going to have to be able to support as well. So
cool. Yeah, thanks. No, there's another question from Nathan. Right now, the main problem with tree view and content search being separate entities, there's no obvious context as to where the content lives. Perhaps in search, tree path could be displayed somehow, i.e. where is the content used exactly? Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, I think that's what the idea of bringing those two together, bringing the folder view and the content search view together is going to enable us to do. And I think when you do browse through using a folder view, it will give you a breadcrumb of exactly where you're looking in the content that's under any particular folder or site.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because and going back a little bit to analytics, which is definitely one of my favorites, is will analytics also provide insights into that particular question, where a particular piece of content lives?
Not, not. I don't think it's going to answer that question. Hopefully, it'll answer the questions of where that content is used and how it's being consumed and who's consuming it and people's engagement with that content.
Cool.
So it's a little bit different than like where the content actually lives in the system.
Yeah, no, I hear you. No,
Yeah.
no, that makes total sense. And we haven't touched on dotCMS Cloud. I mean, obviously we're super proud that we received the SOC 2 Type 2 certification. But as a product, I know that we talked a little bit about it, in the past, and currently being a platform as a service offering. Can you talk a bit about the aspiration that we have with dotCMS Cloud?
Yeah, and I think the dotCMS Cloud we really see continuing to move to shared services. I think there with regard to our cloud hosting and and moving towards, and I think that this is happening already with a lot of the LTS releases, is moving towards a product patching and update cadence that is not invasive, but maintains the security and controls on everyone's dotCMS instances. But looking ahead, I think with regard to the cloud, what we believe would be really useful is to have the sort of a control center for our cloud customers to come in and have a sort of a higher level view of their dotCMS installation. So to be able to see their, dev, UAT, prod environments, to be able to say, okay, I want to take a clone of my prod environment, or I want to spin up a copy of my UAT from, 3 days ago. And just to be able to do that without having to go and engage with, our engineering department. Things like I want to scale, I want to add another node, or I want to take away another node on any of those given clusters, and just having that process of managing the cloud infrastructure much more seamlessly. And given that type of control, I think the idea is to begin to layer services into there that we can offer on top of the product and the platform as well. And dotCDN is an example of one. A service that we're layering in, but there's 100 other services. There's video transcoding, doing things like content validation and content checks using third-party tools to be able to validate the compliance or the accessibility of any given piece of content or page. We can begin to offer that sort of at a platform level.
That's fantastic. Question from Brooke. When will the pre-render.io plugin be available?
Pre-render.io plugin is right now in beta, and we're testing. But it is going to be an add-on. It's not going to be. We'll have to, I don't know. We have to talk internally about what that looks like. But it will require a contract with the pre-render.io SaaS service, which is not expensive. But yeah, I think we're looking probably about a month away for the pre-render.io plugin.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Any more questions, folks? Please feel free to drop it in the chat box. Meanwhile, Will, I know that we've done a lot of work on hybrid headless and in particular headless dotCMS. Are there any areas in headless dotCMS you would like to tackle in the foreseeable future?
I think, and I don't know if everyone understood the widget, the improvements we're making to a widget, but and the idea of the sort of the hybrid widget, but that's a really important capability. I think if you're delivering a hybrid solution through dotCMS, I think that that gives you the ability to deliver things rendered in dotCMS, or to deliver the data that it's going to be required to render it in external, in external components or headlessly. What we are looking, though, with regard to headless implementations is providing an embedded sort of a dotCMS headless hosting solution. And this is a hosting solution that's, going to be tied into, your dotCMS, but can be used to deliver, static or server-side rendered headless sites that are using dotCMS as, their API backend. That's something that we're having internal discussions about what that looks like. But that's a piece I think that we're not very far away from being able to offer.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, and again, there's so much we want to do, right? As a company, and there's only so much time and resources, obviously. But could you also talk a bit about, again, when we have resources and priority to address this, what you would like to do in terms of developer experience in dotCMS?
Yeah, and I think the developer experience, there's different developers that that we need to target, I think, in the with regard to dotCMS. But from let's say a headless developer experience, I think that being able to deliver a sort of a demonstration GitHub repo that combines a headless implementation. We have a demo SPA which does this, but also uses some of the tooling that was built in the command line tool to be able to actually build out the content types that are required for the implementation, to put the content in there that is required to kind of bootstrap the implementation. So it would be from a developer experience, it would be a GitHub repo that really drives an entire implementation, that it also includes the components. I think that's a really important piece that we're going to need. Another thing for the developer experience is being able to spin up, dev.cms instances pretty quickly in the cloud and begin interacting with them. Even if it's a freemium level, even if it's like 30-day trial, here spin up a developer instance to begin working with the tool to be able to offer that. So instead of having to spin up a Docker install yourself, I think would be another really important thing that we could offer.
That's great, and again, I think we covered a lot in this session. Again, really excited to see what we have done and what we're working on. Last minute question from Nathan: for legacy installs, with all the new content types be added automatically during an upgrade? In the past, I've often had to create things manually that were not included. From a content type perspective?
Yeah, they should be added automatically during an upgrade. If they're not, I don't know, we'd have to take a look at that, but the content types are, designed to be added automatically during an upgrade.
Probably also depends on which version you're on, right? If you're on a 3 or 4 series.
That's true.
Right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I recommend everybody to upgrade to the LTS version because it has all the goodies that the team built this year and much more, obviously. But with no further questions from the audience, Will, I really like to thank you for the overview, and everybody who attended this session as well. I wish you a great day and hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.